The year was 1850, and the California desert was full of gold, dreams, and danger. Men from all over the world came with pickaxes and shovels, hoping to find treasure in the dirt. Among them was a man named Thomas Grady. He was not rich, not famous, and not lucky, but he had hope in his heart and a strong will in his bones. Thomas came alone, with nothing but an old mule, a rusty shovel, and a map he bought for $5. He had no family back home, no one waiting for him, only the promise of gold kept him going. The canyon where he settled was far from others, dry and full of red rocks and silent winds. Locals called it Ghost Canyon because many had gone there and never returned. But Thomas did not believe in ghosts until one night. Something changed. It was just after sunset. The sky turning orange and purple. Thomas was digging near an old boulder when he heard a strange sound. It was not wind, not an animal, and not any bird he had ever heard. It was soft, like a cry, but not fully human either. His heart began to race, and he held up his lantern. "Hello?" He called out, but there was no answer, only silence. He walked toward the sound. Deeper into the canyon, the ground became soft, and his boots sank slightly into the dust. Then he saw it, a small hand, barely sticking out from under the sand. It was pale blue, almost glowing in the darkness. Thomas froze. His breath caught in his throat. Slowly, he bent down and began to dig with his hands. Bit by bit, a shape appeared. It was a girl, but not human. Her skin was smooth and bluish silver, her hair white as snow, and her eyes, when they opened, were glowing like stars. She was chained, bruised, and barely breathing. Thomas whispered, "What in God's name?" The girl looked at him, weak but afraid. Her lips moved, but the words were not English. Still, he understood one thing: she was scared. She reached out and clutched his shirt with shaking fingers. "Please, don't let them take me," she said softly. That was when Thomas realized this was not just a strange creature. She was someone who had been hurt, hunted, and left to die. He looked around, feeling like he was being watched. There were strange tracks in the dirt, large boots, some metal footprints, and something clawed. He quickly picked her up, wrapping her in his coat, and hurried back to his camp inside his small tent. He laid her on a blanket and gave her some water. She drank slowly, her hands trembling. Thomas didn't know what to do. He had never seen anything like this before. Was she from the sky? A ship? Another world? She pointed at the stars with one weak finger and whispered something he couldn't understand. But one word was clear: home. That night as she slept, Thomas sat by the fire, his rifle beside him. His hands were shaking, not from fear but from something else. He had come here to find gold, to become rich. But what he found was something far more strange and possibly dangerous. Suddenly, the fire flickered, and he heard footsteps outside the tent. He grabbed his rifle and stepped out, his eyes scanning the darkness. Nothing was there, but the wind carried a whisper, a low, almost growling sound. He looked up at the hills and saw a red light flash once, then disappear. He quickly returned to the tent and saw the girl staring at him, her eyes wide. "There. Coming," she whispered. Then her body went limp again, too weak to speak more. Thomas sat beside her, heart pounding. He had no idea who they were, but he knew one thing for sure: he couldn't leave her. Not now, not after seeing her. Like that, she was chained, buried, and left to die in silence. And somehow, he had been the one to find her. The gold could wait, because in that canyon full of dust and ghosts, he had found something far more rare, a life that needed saving, and someone or something was already on its way to take her back. Asterisk. The night had not been kind. Thomas sat at the edge of his tent, the fire reduced to soft glowing embers, his rifle resting across his lap. Inside, the alien girl lay still, breathing slow but steady, wrapped in a thick wool blanket. The wind howled outside like an old ghost whispering secrets through the rocks. But it wasn't the wind that made Thomas nervous. It was the silence between the gusts. In the early hours of the morning, she stirred. Her eyes blinked slowly. Glowing faintly in the dim light, Thomas rushed to her side, pouring some water into a cup and helping her drink. She drank like someone half dead, then leaned her head back and said something he didn't understand. "I don't speak your language," he said gently. But then she surprised him, repeating slowly in broken English. "They hunt me." Thomas nodded. "Who are they?" She looked toward the tent flap, her body trembling. "Not your kind." Before he could ask more, she held out her hand. A small, glowing object was clutched in her palm. It looked like a broken piece of metal, smooth, curved, and pulsing with light. Thomas didn't dare touch it, but he could feel heat coming off of it, like a living thing. She pointed at it, then her chest. "Need this." He understood. It was keeping her alive, maybe some kind of alien energy source. And it was damaged. Thomas sat down beside her, overwhelmed. He had no gold, no treasure, just a broken tent, an injured alien girl. And now, something powerful people might kill for. By noon, Thomas notices something strange. His mule was nervous, stomping the ground and refusing to eat. Birds that used to fly over the canyon were gone. Even the wind had changed, quieter, heavier. Like something waiting in the air, he took the girl, now a little stronger, and moved her deeper into the canyon to a place only he knew. An old abandoned mine shaft, covered in brush and nearly invisible from above. He laid her down inside, lit a lantern, and placed it near the entrance. "I'll be back," he whispered. And she nodded faintly, trusting him. Back at camp, he cleaned up everything. No sign of the girl, no sign of alien metal. If someone came, they'd find only an empty tent and a worn-out man digging dirt. And someone did come, just after sunset. 4 men on horseback, all dressed like miners, but their boots were shiny, their tools too clean, and their eyes too cold. One of them stepped forward, a scar running down his cheek. "You seen anything strange in these parts?" he asked, his voice too calm. Thomas shook his head. "Just dirt and rocks." The scarred man looked around, sniffed the air like a wolf, and said, "That's funny, 'cause we heard reports of something glowing out here." Thomas shrugged. "I see strange lights when I drink too much. Maybe that's what they saw." The men chuckled, but their laughter was thin and fake. After a few more fake questions, they left, but not far. Thomas saw one of them stay behind, hiding in the rocks, watching. That night, Thomas returned to the mine. The girl sat up as he entered. Holding her glowing shard close to her chest, she spoke slowly, teaching him words. "Name." "Riva," she said, pointing at herself. He smiled gently. "Thomas," pointing at himself. She touched her chest again. "Crash." "Ship," Thomas understood. Her ship had crashed, and she had survived, maybe the only one. Others? He asked. She shook her head. "Gone." "Taken." Her voice cracked, and her eyes filled with tears. Thomas gently placed a hand on her shoulder. She did not pull away. Then she whispered something that sent chills down his spine. "They want the heart." He frowned. "Heart?" She held up the metal shard. "This. Not just keep me alive, it is ship's core." Now it made sense. Whoever was hunting her wasn't just after an alien. They were after power, something that could change everything. Something not meant for human hands. Suddenly, a sound echoed in the mine-distant footsteps. Not near, but moving closer, careful, searching. Riva grabbed his arm, eyes wide. "They find us." Thomas stood quickly, putting out the lantern and grabbing his rifle. He peeked outside. Nothing yet, but dust moved in the canyon. Too quiet. Too smooth. Someone was stalking. He turned to Riva. "Can you move?" She nodded slowly, standing with effort, her legs still weak. He helped her, and they began to climb out of the mine, heartbeats loud in the silence. Behind them, a shadow appeared, metal glinting in its hand. Thomas aimed his rifle and fired. Once, the sound echoing across the cliffs, the figure dropped, but others would come. He grabbed Riva's hand and whispered, "No more hiding, we run now." And as they disappeared into the canyon's dark maze, Thomas realized something. He had come here for gold, but gold had no voice, no eyes, no pain. She did. And he would protect her, even if it cost him everything. Thomas ran through the narrow canyon paths, pulling Riva behind him as fast as her weak legs could go. The moon was high, throwing shadows across the red rocks. Every sound echoed, every footstep, every breath, every falling pebble, behind them. The silence was broken by a mechanical growl. They were being followed. Riva was pale. Her strength fading with each step, she stumbled, and Thomas caught her just before she hit the ground. "We're almost there," he whispered. Though he didn't know where there was, he only knew one thing: he had to keep her safe. They slipped into a small cave hidden behind a wall of thorny brush. Thomas covered the entrance quickly, heart pounding. Inside, the air was cool and dry. Riva collapsed against the wall, her glowing eyes dim. Thomas sat beside her, watching the cave mouth carefully. He didn't speak, not yet, not while danger breathed so close. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time moved slowly. Then they heard them. Footsteps, not soft like human boots, but heavy, sharp, and metallic. The sound of armor and machines moving together. Thomas peeked out, careful not to disturb the brush. He saw them, figures not quite human, dressed in strange black suits, with green visors that covered their faces. They carried weapons shaped like nothing he'd ever seen. Long, smooth, glowing at the ends. They walked like hunters, scanning the ground, the walls, the air, searching for her. Riva held the metal shard close to her chest, whispering to it. In her language, a faint hum filled the cave, soft and warm. Then she looked at Thomas and said, "They not men." "They are collectors," Thomas frowned. "Collectors of what?" She pointed at herself. "Of us. Our life. Our power." Thomas's stomach turned cold. They weren't just chasing Riva to return her home. They were chasing her because she was valuable, because her kind meant power, weapons, knowledge, things Earth hadn't even imagined yet. And they'd kill anyone in their way. Riva placed a weak hand on Thomas's arm. "Soon. They leave, but not for long." Thomas nodded. "We need to move before that." But she shook her head. "I send signal. Now we wait." He looked at the shard in her hand, still glowing. "Who are you calling?" She looked up at the stars through the cracks in the cave ceiling. "My people. My home." Hours later, the hunters moved away, their heavy steps fading into the night. But the tension stayed. Thomas helped Riva out of the cave, carefully watching the path ahead. The night was still dangerous, but they had to move. He took her back toward the shipwreck. She said part of it might still be buried deeper in the cliffs, maybe holding tools or tech she could use. They reached the place by dawn. To Thomas, it looked like just more red rock and sand, but Riva's eyes lit up as she stepped forward, slowly placing the shard against a large stone. A deep hum shook the ground. Suddenly, the rock split apart, sliding open like a hidden door. Inside was a dark tunnel glowing with faint blue lights. Thomas stood frozen, amazed. It wasn't just a crash, it was a buried ship, a hidden tomb of something far greater. They went inside, and the air changed. It smelled strange, cold, electric, like a storm trapped underground. Walls pulsed with soft lights, showing alien markings. Riva touched the walls, whispering to them, and the lights grew brighter. "This was my home," she said quietly. She walked to a console and plugged the shard into a slot. The entire room lit up, revealing more of the ship damaged, but alive. Thomas looked around in awe. He never imagined such things existed beneath the sand. He'd been digging for gold, and now he was standing inside something that felt older and wiser than Earth itself. But the moment didn't last. An alarm sounded loud and sharp. Riva froze, eyes wide. "They found us again," she whispered. Thomas grabbed a strange object from the wall. It looked like a weapon. "Do these work?" Riva nodded, pressing a few buttons. "It shoots light, hot enough to burn metal." Outside, the hunters were returning. Faster this time. Thomas looked at Riva, then at the glowing weapon in his hands. We'll fight if we have to, he said. Riva didn't argue, she just stood beside him. We fight together. And as the enemy footsteps echoed through the canyon, drawing closer to the hidden ship, Thomas Grady stood his ground. He had come here chasing gold, but what he found was something worth more than treasure. A girl who wasn't from his world, but who now belonged to his heart, and for her, he would face anything, even the monsters. From the stars, asterisk dust exploded in the morning air as boots slammed into sand. Thomas grabbed Riva's hand and pulled her away from the control room. The ancient alien ship behind them flickered and buzzed. Too damaged to fly, too loud to hide. They didn't have time anymore. The collectors had arrived, and this time, they were coming in full force. Thomas could hear the sound of metal scraping stone, the mechanical growl of boots grinding against the canyon walls. He looked over his shoulder and saw 3 dark shapes entering the tunnel, each carrying a glowing weapon. He didn't wait to count more. He held the alien blaster in one hand, Riva in the other, and ran outside the desert. Sun was rising, painting the cliffs in shades of blood and fire. Thomas and Riva burst from the stone doorway, their feet slipping in the sand. Behind them, the door cracked open wider, and a green beam of light sizzled past Thomas's head, hitting the rock and turning it to glass. They're not here to take prisoners, he muttered. Riva's grip tightened around his arm. No. They want the core, Thomas nodded, breath short. Then let's make sure they don't get it. They ran across the open desert, weaving between dry bushes and tall rocks. Each second felt like a lifetime. Every heartbeat was a war drum. In Thomas's ears, they had no horses, no wagon, no cover, only the endless red land in the heat of fear. Suddenly, Riva stopped, nearly pulling Thomas to the ground. She pointed at a narrow crack between 2 cliffs. Old river path. Safe, she said. They slipped into the narrow gap, just wide enough for one person to pass at a time. The air was cooler in the shaded crevice, but it carried sound like a drum. Every step echoed, every breath bounced off the walls. Still, it gave them a small head start, and right now, that was gold. As they moved deeper, Thomas noticed strange markings carved into the stone, symbols, alien letters glowing faintly with blue light. Riva touched one gently and whispered something in her language. The stone shimmered for a moment, then revealed a hidden door. Shortcut, she said weakly. Thomas pushed it open, revealing a steep stairway carved straight into the rock. It went down, the light fading with every step, until the tunnel opened into a hollowed-out cavern. It was ancient, forgotten, filled with strange crystals and bones that didn't belong to any earth creature. Thomas looked around and said, "Is this yours?" Riva nodded slowly. "Old outpost." Before crash, they sat for a moment, catching their breath. Riva leaned against the wall, shaking, her strength running out. The shard she carried pulsed faintly, weaker now. Thomas looked at it and then at her. "What happens if it dies?" She looked away. "Then I die too." Thomas clenched his jaw. "No. We're not letting that happen." He stood up, his eyes scanning the cavern walls, looking for anything that might help. Then, behind a broken pillar, he found a storage unit. Metal, sealed but not locked. Inside were devices, tools, and small energy cells glowing dimly. "Riva," he called, "will these work?" She forced herself to sit up, her eyes focusing on the cells. Yes. If right type, together, they worked quickly, Thomas holding the pieces, Riva guiding him with shaking hands. Finally, the shard hummed louder, brighter, and Riva let out a soft gasp as color returned to her face. Just then, a voice echoed through the cavern, cold, distorted, metallic. "Give her to us, and we will let you live." Thomas stepped in front of Riva, raising the alien weapon. "You'll have to earn her," he growled. The cave shook slightly, footsteps growing louder, closer from the darkness. 2 collectors appeared, their armor gleaming like wet stone. They aimed their glowing rifles, and time slowed. Thomas fired first. the alien blaster humming as it shot a blue beam that hit one of the collectors square in the chest. The armor sparked and cracked, the figure stumbling. The other one fired back, grazing Thomas's shoulder, burning his shirt. He grunted in pain. Falling back, Riva screamed his name and crawled to him, placing her hand on his wound. Her fingers glowed faintly, and the burn faded slightly. "Not dead," she whispered. "You stay." Thomas pushed himself up, bleeding but alive. He fired again, this time with fury, knocking the second attacker back into the wall. Dust rained down from above, and the cave began to tremble. "We need to leave," Riva said. "More will come." Thomas nodded and helped her up. They exited through another hidden passage behind the cavern, stepping out onto a high cliff that overlooked the entire canyon from here. They could see smoke in the distance where the ship had once been, now burning, but far above, something else caught their eye. A dot in the sky, growing brighter, larger. Riva smiled faintly. "My signal." It reached them. Thomas stared upward, still holding her hand. The chase wasn't over, but maybe help was finally coming. The sun was high, burning hot over the cliffs of the canyon. Thomas stood beside Riva on the edge of a rocky hill, his shirt torn, his arm wrapped in cloth from the wound he took in the cave. Riva leaned against him, tired but alive, her skin slowly glowing again as the shard in her hand pulsed stronger. Below them, smoke rose from the broken canyon, black trails marking the crash site of her hidden ship. Now under attack, now lost. "They destroyed the entrance," Riva whispered. Thomas looked down at the fading blue glow beneath the smoke. "Can they still get the core?" he asked. She shook her head. "They don't know where it really is." Thomas turned to her. "What do you mean?" Riva opened her hand and showed the shard. "This is not just power, it is a key." She pointed to the western cliff, where jagged rocks formed a wall no miner dared cross. "Ship is there, deeper, hidden from eyes." Thomas's eyes narrowed. "And you can open it?" Riva nodded. "Yes. If we get there before they do." They began climbing, every step harder than the last. The path was narrow, rocks crumbling beneath their feet, the wind growing stronger as they got higher. But Riva moved with quiet strength, now her energy returning with each hour. The shard stayed lit. Thomas followed, his body aching but his spirit burning. He didn't care about gold anymore. He just wanted her safe at last. They reached a ledge hidden behind a wall of thorn vines and wild brush. Riva placed the shard into a crack in the stone, and the cliff began to vibrate. The wall shimmered, flickered, then faded like smoke. Behind it, a massive door made of silver metal slowly opened with a deep, ancient sound. A wave of cool air hit Thomas's face. It smelled clean, sharp, like lightning and water. Riva stepped inside first, her hand glowing. As she touched the walls, lights blinked on, one by one, revealing a long hallway made of smooth metal and alien symbols. "This ship was mine," she said quietly. "I was born on it." They walked deeper into the ship, passing rooms filled with strange machines, broken screens, and dark chambers. The air felt heavy with memory, as if the walls still remembered the crash, the loss, the silence. At the end of the hallway was a round chamber with a pedestal in the center. Riva placed the shard into the pedestal, and the entire room came alive. The walls lit up with soft blue light, and a map of the stars appeared in the air. Thomas gasped. Stepping back, it showed thousands of stars, each blinking like a heartbeat. "This is your world?" he asked. Riva pointed to a bright cluster far away. "My home is there." Then the room changed, showing Earth from space. Small red dots appeared on the surface, moving, hunting. Riva's face turned serious. "They call others. More collectors are coming." Thomas clenched his fists. "Can this ship fly?" She shook her head. "Too broken, but we can hide here for a little while." Suddenly, an alarm echoed through the chamber, sharp, cold, and urgent. Riva looked up, panic in her eyes. "They found us," turned toward the Hallway raising the alien weapon. How long until your people arrive? Riva closed her eyes, focusing. Soon. Minutes maybe, Thomas exhaled sharply. Then we hold this place. He moved quickly, sealing doors, blocking paths with crates. Riva activated defense panels in the walls, releasing energy shields and dim force fields. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. The first collector entered with a hiss of air, stepping into the hallway like a shadow with armor. Thomas fired, hitting the wall just beside it. The blast burning a hole in the metal. The creature ducked and returned fire. Green energy slicing past his shoulder. More followed. 2, 3, 5. They moved like wolves, coordinated and silent. But Thomas fought like fire. Riva backed him up, using control panels to trap enemies in energy loops, redirect doorways, and overcharge the lights to blind them. Still, they kept coming. Thomas fell to one knee, chest heaving, blood on his face. One collector raised its weapon to finish him. Then the air split open. A beam of silver light shot down from the sky, piercing through the ship ceiling. Everyone froze, even the collectors. A sound filled the room, a deep hum like music made of thunder and starlight. Riva's face lit up, tears in her eyes. They came, she whispered. A new figure descended in the beam, tall, glowing, armored in white light. It raised one hand, and every collector in the room shut down at once, dropping to the floor like dolls without strings. Thomas looked up, his body shaking. Is that your people? Riva nodded, stepping forward. My guardian. My father's friend. The figure turned to Thomas, eyes unreadable through the helmet. He protected you, Riva said softly. He risked everything. The being looked at Thomas, then gave a slow, respectful nod. Riva ran to Thomas and helped him stand. It's over, she said, holding him close. You saved me. Again, Thomas smiled weakly. Guess I'm getting good at it. Asterisk. The chamber was quiet again. The floor was covered with the fallen bodies of the collector's machines and monsters wearing the shape of men. The Silver Guardian stood in silence beside Riva, its body humming like a living engine. Thomas leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Blood dried on his forehead and arm. He had never felt so tired, and yet never so alive. They are shut down, Riva whispered. But more will come. Thomas looked around. How many? She closed her eyes, fingers touching her glowing shard. Too many. They sent full command. From the ceiling above, blue light poured down like rain. A voice echoed from the Guardian, not from its mouth, but from the air around it. Extraction. In process, the voice said, calm and powerful. Then the Guardian looked at Riva. And then Thomas. He must stay behind, the voice added. Thomas blinked, his heart skipping a beat. What? He asked. Riva turned to the Guardian, shaking her head. No, he saved me. I stay with him. The Guardian tilted its head. Human is not compatible. This mission is for survival, not sentiment. Thomas looked at Riva, his chest tightening. So that's it? You're leaving? She stepped toward him, gently taking his hand. I will not go without you. Before anyone could say more, the ground trembled. From the broken tunnels behind them came a loud roar, machines awakening, engines heating. Then the walls cracked and enemy ships descended from above, sliding down the cliff. Walls like insects. The collectors had returned, this time with machines taller than trees, walkers with legs of steel and eyes glowing red. They fired without warning, beams of energy cutting through the air. The Guardian stepped forward, raising its hand, a shield of light forming in front of Thomas and Riva. But the force shook the room, cracks spreading through the walls. We must leave now, the voice said. But Thomas looked back at the damaged hallway where the alien core still glowed faintly. That thing. It's what they want, right? Riva nodded. Yes, if they take it, they can destroy many worlds. Thomas picked up his weapon and limped toward the hallway. I'll hold them off, he said. Riva rushed to him. No, you'll die. He smiled, a little crooked, a little tired. Maybe, but someone has to buy time. The Guardian didn't move to stop him. It only said, "Human bravery is illogical but noted." Thomas ran into the hallway as explosions rocked the ship. He found a narrow point in the passage and set up what little defense he could. Metal crates, burning cables, shards of alien power. Then he waited, breathing slow. His weapon humming in his hands, the first enemy appeared. A collector with silver armor and a glowing staff. Thomas fired, blasting it into the wall. More followed. 3, 4, 6. He fought with fury, ducking and moving, every shot burning. Bright in the dark corridor, he remembered the gold he once dreamed of, the coins he hoped to dig from the ground, but now, his hands were covered in dirt and alien blood, and all he wanted to protect was her. Back in the main chamber, Riva stared at the door, her hands trembling. "Why does he fight alone?" she whispered. The Guardian answered, "Because he loves without condition. He defends what he cannot keep, that is human strength." Tears rolled down her cheeks as she grabbed the shard from the console and turned to leave. But instead of boarding the beam of light, she ran back toward Thomas, back into the burning hallway. She found him kneeling, the enemy nearly reaching him. She raised her hands, the shard glowing bright like a star. A pulse of light blasted through the corridor, pushing the enemies back with force like wind and fire. Thomas turned, half surprised, half smiling. "I told you to go," he said. She helped him up, her eyes shining. "You fight for me, I fight with you. Together." They moved back toward the beam of light, firing and dodging. One against many, the Guardian covered their path, blocking attacks, shielding their steps. As they reached the extraction point, Thomas stumbled again, too weak to climb. Riva turned and knelt beside him, her voice soft. "I told you. You're not alone." The Guardian extended its hand, lifting both of them into the light. The enemies roared below, helpless to follow. As the ship behind them began to collapse, burning in fire and dust, Thomas looked down at the world he once knew, of gold, of dreams, of pain, and he smiled. Because he didn't find gold, he found something greater. Light surrounded them as they rose into the sky. It was not harsh or blinding, but soft like the glow of morning sunlight through fog. Thomas closed his eyes, his body aching, his breath slow. He didn't know if they were flying or floating, or dreaming, but he knew Riva's hand was still in his, warm and steady. The Silver Guardian rose beside them, silent as a ghost. Below, the canyon burned flames, swallowing the broken alien ship and the bodies of the collectors. The wind carried smoke across the desert, and far in the distance, the last rays of the California sun faded behind the hills. Thomas and Riva passed through a layer of clouds and entered a ship unlike anything he could have imagined. It was alive, with light and sound, but not loud or chaotic. The walls pulsed gently, responding to their presence. The floor was smooth and soft under his boots. He felt peace, not fear. Even as machines examined him and strange creatures watched from afar, Riva spoke to them in her language, her voice clear and strong now. She stood tall beside him, no longer a frightened girl buried under sand. She was something else now, free, radiant, powerful. A soft blue creature floated toward Thomas, scanning his arm and side. It released a wave of energy that washed over him like warm water. The pain faded. The wounds healed, and strength returned to his body. He looked at Riva, blinking in disbelief. "What was that?" She smiled gently. "Healing, you don't need bandages here." They walked through the halls together, past windows that showed stars and planets Thomas had never dreamed of. He saw ships made of crystal flying through space like birds. He saw creatures of light, of mist, of steel and flame. And yet, none of them scared him because Riva was beside him. And she made all of this feel like home. Later, Riva brought him to a room where her people gathered, elders with glowing robes and eyes like silver. They spoke through light and gesture, but Thomas understood. They thanked him deeply. One elder placed a hand on his shoulder and said through a translator, "You gave more than help. You gave choice, you gave her freedom, another added. You may choose or reward wealth, knowledge, power. Thomas looked at them. Then at Riva. She met his gaze, unsure of what he would say. He smiled and shook his head. I don't want gold or power. I just want to stay. The room fell silent for a moment. Then one by one, the elders nodded. You are welcome, Thomas Grady of Earth, they said. You are family now. Riva's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of joy. She reached for his hand, holding it tight. You are not alone anymore, she whispered. Time passed, but Thomas no longer counted days by sunrises or sunsets. He learned their ways slowly, how to navigate stars, how to use the energy of light, how to listen to a ship's pulse. He wasn't the smartest or the strongest, but he was patient, kind, and brave, and that made all the difference. Riva stayed close, showing him how to speak their language, how to move through the cities in the stars. They laughed, they argued, they healed together. One day, as they stood on a balcony overlooking the gas giant swirling with blue storms, Thomas turned to her and asked, Do you ever miss Earth? She looked at him and said, I missed home. Until I met you. Now home is wherever you are. He smiled, pulling something from his pocket, an old gold coin, dusty and worn. He had kept it from his mining days, a reminder of where he started. He placed it in her hand. This is the only gold I care about now, and it's yours. Riva looked at it, then at him. No, she said softly. You are more precious than gold. And in that moment, high above a planet no human had ever touched, a prospector from Earth and an alien girl who once lay buried in dust stood together, no longer alone. They were survivors, partners, family, not because of fate, not because of war, but because one man, looking for gold, had chosen to protect life instead of wealth. And that choice changed everything.